I'm going to give a talk. The main theme of the talk will be Bodhimind. And I've got two sets of texts. First, this text is 3 pages. Please, everybody take 3. And then there's copies here. And these are in 3 languages: Netherlands, German, and English. Please choose only one language, because there's not each for everybody. Esther? Wie liest man AU? AU? Au. Au. Naufgesät. Naufgesät. Hai observiert alles naufgesät. Nauche. Nauche. Ah, dass das G ist. Nauche. Nauche. Everybody has text? Okay, for your entertainment I will try to read first in Dutch the poem by Miyazawa Kenji, who is a Japanese poet who lived at the beginning of the last century, and he wrote a lot of poems but also stories for children. He's not a Zen Buddhist, but a Buddhist of the Nichiren school. So he had deep belief in the Lotus Sutra. Still, the poem, this poem which I'm now reading, is a very famous poem in Japan, and in a way it expresses the spirit about that I want to talk today. Omplooibaar in de regen, omplooibaar in de wind, omplooibaar in de sneeuw en in de zomerhitte. Met een gezond lichaam, zonder begeerte en zonder woede. Slechts een zoete glimlach op de lippen. 4 stralen bruine rijst op een dag. Eet hij met miso en weinig groente. Hij observeert alles nauwgezet. Luistert goed en begrijpt. Door zichzelf te vergeten, behoudt hij de dingen steeds in de geest. Hij leeft in een kleine rietenhut aan de rand van een wei achter het dennenbos. Is in het oosten een kind ziek, gaat hij erheen om het te verzorgen. Beugt zich in het westen een uitgeputte moeder onder de last, gaat hij erheen om de reisbundels voor haar te dragen. Liegt in het zuiden jemand te sterven, gaat hij erheen om hem de angst om te nemen. Wie liegen sich in het Norden 2 in de haren, gaat hij erheen om de onzin te beëindigen. In de droogte vergiet hij tranen, dwaalt hulpeloos rond als een zomerkool brengt. Allen zien hem als een sukkel, niemand neemt hem serieus en hij is niemand tot last. Zo een mens wil ik zijn. For those of you who didn't understand, like myself, on the second page, well, below this there's a German version, but on the second page there's actually two different English versions. I will read the first one. Strong in the rain, strong in the wind, strong against the summer heat and snow, he is healthy and robust. Free of all desire, he never loses his generous spirit, nor the quiet smile on his lips. He eats 4 go of unpolished rice, miso and a few vegetables a day. He does not consider himself in whatever occurs. His understanding comes from observation and experience, and he never loses sight of things. He lives in a little thatched roof hut in a field in the shadows of a pine tree grove. If there's a sick child in the east, he goes there to nurse the child. If there's a tired mother in the west, he goes to her and carries her sheaves. If someone is near death in the south, he goes and says, "Don't be afraid." If there's strife and lawsuits in the north, he demands that the people put an end to their pettiness. He weeps at the time of drought, he plots about at a loss during the cold summer. Everybody calls him blockhead. No one sings his praises or takes him to heart. That is the sort of person I want to be. So today the talk is about Bodhimind. What is Bodhimind? First of all, Bodhi is a Sanskrit word which can be translated as awakening, for example. The awakening of the Buddha 2,500 years ago under the Bodhi tree. And that tree is called Bodhi tree because the Buddha awakened there. That's the first and most important example of Bodhi in Buddhism. But then it is always emphasized that we also need to have this mind, the mind of Bodhi. Sometimes it's also translated as the way mind, the mind of the way, because the word Bodhi, the Sanskrit word Bodhi, when it was translated into Chinese, the Chinese found 2 different solutions. One was to take the word as it is and to just look for Chinese characters which are pronounced in a similar way. So they didn't translate it at all, just as some words from the Latin language are now used in other languages in Northern Europe. So the Chinese took 2 Chinese characters which have the same pronunciation but a different meaning. And those words are now pronounced in Japanese Bodai. So one translation of Bodhimind, which is in Sanskrit Bodhicitta, and Chitta was translated as Shin, which is a mind, is Bodai Shin, the mind of Bodhi. And the other solution that they found was, we look for character, Chinese character, which has maybe the same meaning as Bodhi. And the character that they chose is the character which is also known in the West as Tao. Tao is, for example, the absolute truth in Taoism. And this character also has the the meaning way. So that is the reason why Bodhimind, and translated in this way as the mind of the way, in Japanese it's Doshin. Doshin can also be translated as the mind of the way. And sometimes you also find the translation way-seeking mind, which is interesting in translation because it's not a very literal translation. In the word itself there's no talk about seeking. The word itself means either bodhi, bodhi, or it means way and mind. But there's no talk about seeking. Still, in some texts, we find the translation way seeking mind for Bodhimind. Which isn't literal, but this translation makes it easier for us to relate to this word, because you can hardly expect from us that we have the enlightened mind of Shakyamuni that he had 2,500 years ago. But probably everyone who's interested in Buddhism and practices meditation in this tradition at least has a mind that is seeking for that. Or at least that's what we think. So if Bodhi mind is translated as way seeking mind, it's not a literal translation, but it makes it easier for us to relate to Bodhi mind, because we all have the feeling that we need to wake up. We need to have Bodhi. And although it's not a literal translation, I think as a translation it's okay, because not only makes it easier to relate to Bodhi mind by saying way seeking mind, but actually when we asked who is seeking Bodhi, what is it that is seeking? In the end, we come to the conclusion that Bodhi itself is seeking Bodhi. We are not aware of that in the beginning. In the beginning, we think Bodhi is what is missing. I need Bodhi, I need awakening, I need enlightenment. And I'm looking for that. But then you might realize that actually the Bodhi you are looking for is nothing else than the force of the seeking. That which gives us the the impulse to seek. If we wouldn't have Bodhi already, we wouldn't be seeking for Bodhi. So in the end, way seeking mind and the mind of the way are not different. So although when I make translations, I do not use this translation way seeking mind, but I translate it as the mind of the way or awakened mind or Bodhi mind, whatever, I still find that the other translation, way seeking mind, is also okay. If you keep in mind that the way seeking mind is no different from the mind of the way, because the way itself is looking for the way. They are no different. Now I want to have a look at Dogen Zenji and what he wrote about Bodhi mind. He wrote about it in many different texts. One example is the Tenzo Kyokun, which I talked about last year, and those who were here last year might remember that in the beginning of the Tenzo Kyokun, which are instructions for the cook, Dogen Zenji says that what the cook needs first of all is Bodhi mind. If you don't have Bodhi mind and you're in the kitchen, you will only have a lot of trouble, hard work, you suffer from the work, and it's useless in the end without Bodhi mind. And a couple of paragraphs later, Dogen Zenji defines Bodhi mind as rolling up the sleeves. The Japanese is taski. So you have these long ropes with the long sleeves and you can't work with those. So what you do, if you have to work, you use the taski, these ropes inside the sleeves to roll up the ropes. And Dogen Zenji says for the cook it means that he rolls up the sleeves so he can work. That's Bodhi mind. And then in the end of the text, he explains the mind in detail when he talks about three minds. Joyful mind. Joyful mind is the mind that is happy to be in the kitchen. Dogen Zenji says, you should be happy that you're not in heaven now. You should be happy that you're not in paradise, but in the kitchen. Because if you would be in paradise, you have no opportunity to practice Zen. They have no session in paradise. That's why it's called paradise. You should be happy that you're not in paradise, because now you can practice. You have the chance to encounter the Buddha way. And the next mind is the old mind, which he also explains as parent mind, parental mind, the mind of a parent that has only one child, and all the love, all the attention goes to this child, and there's no expectation back. That's easy with a child, but if you're in the kitchen and you cook for people, you would sometimes expect that after all the labor you do and all the love you put into the cooking, that somebody would say thank you to you after the meal, but nobody says that. You have to cut short the amounts of the Zen that you can do. You cook, people eat it, but still after eating in silence nobody says thank you. If you don't have the mind of a parent, you can't be the Tenzo. And then last is big mind, great mind, magnanimous mind. Dogen says it's like the ocean, it's like a mountain. The ocean doesn't choose what rivers should flow into the ocean. The ocean accepts all rivers. That's why it becomes as huge as the ocean. The mountain doesn't choose the soil. The mountain accepts all the soil, and that's why it becomes a big mountain. And with that mind, only with that mind, you can be a Tenzo. Joyful mind, the mind of a parent, big mind. And these three together are Bodhimind. There's another definition of Bodhimind which we find in the Gakudo Yoshinshu. Gakudo Yoshinshu is a text that contains 10 chapters. Each of these concentrate on things we need to keep in mind when we practice the way. That's the meaning of Gakudo Yoshinshu, a collection of words about things to keep in mind when learning the way. And the first chapter starts with you need to arouse Bodhimind. I will start once more, or I will try once more to read this first in Dutch. Ontwaak de geest van verlichting. De geest van verlichting heeft vele namen. Hij is echter en dezelfde geest. Patriarch Nagarjuna zegt: de geest die de vergankelijkheid aller ontstaan en vergaan in de wereld inziet, wordt ook wel de geest van verlichting genoemd. Laten we derhalve deze geest als de geest van verlichting eens nader bekijken. Als je de vergankelijkheid echt inziet, dan wordt de egoïstische geest niet gewekt. Er verschijnt geen erzucht en je zult versteld staan van de snelheid van het tijdsverloop. In English, do I have English text here somewhere? This English translation is not by me. The Dutch translation is based on my German translation, while this English translation is by Nishijima. To establish the will to the truth. So Nishijima's translation of Bodhimind is the will to the truth, which is also an interesting version. He doesn't say way mind or way seeking mind, but will to the truth. The word of Bodaishin, or the will to the truth, has many other titles, but they can be identified totally into one word, Bodaishin. Master Nagarjuna says, we can also call the mind, which can grasp that the situations of secular societies are so flexible and instant, as the will to the truth. And such a kind of intuitive mind is also called Bodaishin, or the will to the truth. Therefore, I think that it might be possible for us to call those many kinds of expressions of the mind totally with the title of Bodaishin, or the will to the truth. Truly speaking, when we reflect the instantaneousness of the present moment, our selfish mind does not occur, and consciousness of fame and profit does not appear. Therefore, we sincerely worry about the fact that time, light, and light run away much too fast. Then our practicing the truth can be so sincere as if we were putting out burning hair.
Is that the same text?
It's kind of different, I think. Yeah, the last sentence was missing in the Dutch. Mm-hmm. so I cut it out. But it's also an important sentence that we should practice as if our head was on fire. When Nishijima translates, usually he has an English translator or an American who's working on the translation, while this is from his blog, and I think it's his raw English here. So it's not such a refined translation. But I think we can get the point, which is that Dogen defines Bodhimind here using a quote by Nagarjuna as the mind that sees into impermanence. Yeah, here he says so flexible and instant. What is meant here, what Nagarjuna says, it's the mind that penetrates impermanence, that sees that nothing is permanent. That's Bodhimind. And then Dogen develops and says, if you see into impermanence, you cannot be selfish anymore, because there's nothing to cling to. You're not worried about fame and profit anymore. And you will only be worried about the swiftness of time. And you will practice if your head was on fire. That's Dogen's definition in this text, which is from 1234. And as Dogen was born in 1200, it's pretty easy to calculate how old he was. He was 34 when he wrote this text. He died when he was 53, so we don't know what Dogen would have said or written if he had lived until 80. So most of the texts he wrote in his 30s, and then in the early 40s he was very productive. The next text I want to talk about, Hotsubo Daishin, he wrote when he was 42, 43. Or maybe first, for those of you who are not familiar with who Dogen is in the first place. Dogen is a Japanese Buddhist monk who lived in the 13th century, first half of the 13th century. And at the time, Buddhism had been transmitted to Japan already for 600 years. The person who introduced Buddhism in Japan, his name is Shotoku Taishi. It's a prince who imported Buddhism from Korea. And I want to read a quote by Prince Shotoku later, at the end of the talk. Anyway, for 600 years, Buddhism was known in Japan. The sutras had been transmitted. There were Buddhists living in monasteries. But at the beginning of the 13th century, Dogen had the feeling that something essential is missing. And he went to China to learn and study Buddhism once more. And then he brought back Zen to Japan. And for Dogen, the feeling he had was that there had been the sutras in Japan. There were big golden pagodas. There were many Buddhist priests dressed in colorful, expensive robes. But what was missing for Dogen was practice. He said there's no practice in Japan. How come we have had Buddhism for 600 years but no practice? And practice for Dogen, in one sense, means to practice sitting meditation, to just sit. But then, in a different sense, it's also all about Bodhimind. That's why he starts this text here with saying, first you need Bodhimind. And you don't find it here on the paper, but then the text continues to quote what other people said about Bodhimind in Japan. And they have all very profound Buddhist, very philosophical definitions of Bodhimind. But Dogen says they have no idea what Bodhimind is all about, because look at them, look what they do, look how they dress. They're all concerned about fame and profit. They're all attached to their ego. If that's the case, how could they know what Bodhimind is? Now let's move on to the chapter Hotsubo Daishin, which you find under the quote of the Gakudo Yoshinshu. Maybe this time I will spare you my Dutch reading and read the English right at once. Well, I can do the Dutch as well if you want to be amused. But maybe I'll do the English. Hotsubo Daishin. And this translation is also from Nishijima, but with my cross. So some polishing has been done here. Establishment of the Bodhimind. Bodhimind is inevitably established relying upon thinking mind. Bodhi is the sound of an Indian word. Here it is called the truth. Chitta is the sound of an Indian word. Here it is called thinking mind. Without this thinking mind, it is impossible to establish the Bodhi mind. That is not to say that this thinking mind is the Bodhi mind itself, but we establish the Bodhi mind with this thinking mind. Now this is interesting because in Zen we often say that you shouldn't think at all. You don't need to think. You don't need the mind. You don't need the thinking mind. And Dogen Zenji, before this quote, I don't have the whole chapter here on the paper. Before the quote, Dogen Zenji says, well, there's also two other kinds of mind, which are also translated as mind in Chinese and Japanese. One is the mind that all living beings share, even plants and animals. But that's not the mind of Bodhi mind. And he says mind means also the universal essence, what permeates the whole universe. That's also mind, but that's not Bodhi mind. Here he says, or he insists, that it's our ordinary thinking mind, and with this we establish Bodhi mind. It's not something that everything already has, or it's something very transcendental which we can never reach, but our ordinary thinking mind. We need this to establish Bodhi mind. Of course, this thinking mind itself is not Bodhi mind, but this is the tool which we use to establish Bodhi mind. To establish the Bodhi mind means to vow that and to endeavor so that, quotation marks, before I myself cross over, I will take across all living beings. So this is another definition of Bodhi mind. Before he says to understand and see through impermanence as Bodhi mind. Here he says to vow and endeavor so that before I myself cross over, I will take across all living beings. Yeah, I will go into this later, but well, what is important is that Dogen Zenji says that he does not say first you need to cross over yourself and then you can help others cross to the other shore. Also, he doesn't say, well, you can cross over at the same time. The vow is before I myself cross over. I don't cross over, but first I will take across all living beings. Which logically is impossible. How can I take over living beings if I don't cross myself? But the vow here is formulated in a way that it says, I will first take over all living beings and then I cross myself. And the crossing or the taking over is of course the taking over from this world of suffering to the other shore of nirvana. So it's a vow to save or liberate all suffering beings. The person with Bodhi mind basically says, I shall stay in suffering until all other suffering beings are saved first. I should be last. I will be last. First I save all other suffering beings. That is Bodhi mind. Even if their form is humble, those who establish this mind are already the guiding teachers of all living beings. This mind is not in it, and it does not now suddenly arise. It is neither one nor many. It is not natural, and it is not formed. It does not abide in our body, and our body does not abide in the mind. This mind does not pervade the Dharma world. It is neither of the past nor of the future. It is neither present nor absent. It is not of a subjective nature. It is not of an objective nature. It is not of a combined nature, and it is not of a causeless nature. So now Dogen goes on to analyze, where does this Bodhi mind come from? How does it happen? How can we get to Bodhi mind? How is it possible that we arouse Bodhimind? And here in this paragraph, he denies a lot of things. He says it's not in the future, not in the past, not in the present, neither objective nor subjective, not subjective. It doesn't come from the outside, but also we don't have it inside. So basically, we cannot grasp it. But, and that's the next sentence, nevertheless, at a place where there is mystical communication of the truth, establishment of the Bodhimind occurs. Nevertheless, at a place where there is mystical communication of the truth, establishment of the Bodhimind occurs. The Japanese word which is translated here as mystical communication of the truth is kan no doko. Kan means to feel something, or also it can mean kanno. Kan is feeling, maybe also an understanding, while o is a reaction that happens when one thing meets the other. Do is the same as the do of Doshin, the Dao, but also a way, the truth. And ko means a crossing. So I literally interpret this as a place where ways cross, paths cross, and a reaction happens. A reaction where feelings are exchanged. So that's why in Dutch you have the translation desalniettemin wordt de geest van de weg gewekt waar wegen zich kruisen is doko. The ways cross, paths cross, wegen zich kruisen en harten met elkaar communiceren. So harten isn't quite literal, but it's the kan of kanno. There's feeling involved, and communiceren is the o. There's a reaction. Nishijima chooses to say a mystical communication of the truth. And kanno doko, this expression we find in Dogen when he, for example, talks about his exchange with his teacher Tendo Nyojo in China. When Dogen studied in China, he was sitting next to a monk who was sleeping all the time, and his teacher was admonishing him and saying, he told him, Shinjin Datsuraku. And at that time, Dogen thought, he understood. He awakened. And what happened is, Dogen said, it's kan no doko. Paths crossed and hearts communicated. Or that's how I interpret it. What is interesting there, Shinjin Datsuraku, in Dogen's understanding, means that body and mind drop off. Letting go of body and mind. And now you would expect that somewhere in China, in the collected sayings of Tendo Nyojo, you would find this expression. The funny thing is, Tendo Nyojo's words have been collected in China by his Chinese students, but this expression doesn't exist there. What does exist is a different expression, which means to remove the dust from the mind. And this is also pronounced Shinjin Datsuraku. But the meaning is completely different, obviously. Remove the dust from the mind. So today the scholars are not sure if Tendo Nyojo actually said drop off body and mind, but nobody wrote it down in China. Or maybe he said remove the dust from your mind. And Dogen understood that, but he went deeper and said you should drop off body and mind. Or maybe Dogen misunderstood his teacher. Maybe he couldn't. In the Chinese it's a little bit different, but for Japanese ear it sounds the same. So maybe actually the teacher was just saying to that sleeping monk, hey, wake up. drop the dust from your mind. And Dogen understood you should drop body and mind and was awakened. We don't know. But so what is interesting here and what is important is that for the paths to cross and the hearts to communicate, it takes two sides. It's not enough to find an enlightened teacher, but also you have to have the ear to understand it. If everybody in the Zen hall at that moment would have had the ear, then all of them would have been enlightened, and we surely would have also sources in Chinese that talk about this incident. But for some reason, no Chinese source mentions dropping of body and mind. Or maybe Dogen was the only one awake at the moment. Yeah, it's also possible. So, and here in the context of Bodhimind, Dogen says that's how Bodhimind occurs. It's not that we carry it inside already, but also it's not coming from the outside. But there's two factors meeting. Two things have to meet. And that's how Bodhimind arises. In Nishijima's words, it's a mystical communication of truth. It is not conferred upon us by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and it is beyond our own ability. So that's the point I just wanted to make. If it had nothing to do with us, then it could be transmitted from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas directly from above. But that's not enough. But also it's not in our own ability. Then we wouldn't need a teacher, we wouldn't need a Sangha. There would be no use in kind of practicing with a teacher if we already carry it in ourselves, and we would only have to bring it out. Both things need to come together. Establishment of the mind occurs during mystical communication, or again, crossing of the paths and communication of the hearts. And so it is not inherent. This establishment of the Bodhi mind is most often able to occur in a human body on the southern continent of Jambudvipa. And the southern continent of Jambudvipa, well, there's in the Buddhist legend, there are 4 continents in each direction: north, east, west, south. And south, that's where we live. So planet Earth is located on the southern continent. Rarely it also occurs in the 8 troubled worlds, but not often. It's also possible that other beings establish Bodhimind, but that's very rare. So which are these 8 troubled worlds? For example, what I just mentioned, paradise. Paradise is also one of the troubled worlds. Why is it a troubled world? Because in paradise we never think about suffering, because we don't suffer. So we don't have the chance to think about the cause of suffering. If we don't have to think about the cause of suffering, and also we have no opportunity to think about the suffering of other people, there's no way we can establish Bodhi mind. So that's why paradise, for example, is one of the troubled worlds. Other troubled worlds are hell. In hell, the suffering is so big that we're kind of absorbed by the suffering itself. We can't really go into the root. Why am I suffering? So that's why we should be happy to be born as living beings in this world with a moderate amount of suffering, not too much, not too little, and this enables us to arise Bodhi mind. After establishing the Bodhi mind, we do training for 3 Asamkaya Kalpas, or for 100 great Kalpas. In some cases we practice for countless Kalpas and become a Buddha. This Asamkaya Kalpa, or the Great Kalpa, this also comes from Buddhist philosophy. How is an Asamkaya Kalpa defined? Basically, it's an incredibly long amount of time. One definition I know is you have a block of granite, which is 1 kilometer long, 1 kilometer wide, and 1 kilometer high. And you have an angel that is descending from the heavens, and the angel is dressed in feathers. And with the sleeve of this feather dress, the angel is softly wiping over that block of granite. And because of the friction, a little dust is removed from the granite. but well, nothing much happens, of course. And then the angel returns to heaven again. And 100 years later, the angel comes again and does the same thing, same procedure, with the feathers softly wiping over the granite. And after a couple of 10,000 years or so, the edges of the granite will get a little bit softer because of the friction. And after a million years, maybe you can actually see that the edges are getting rounder. And then eventually, well, the granite will become smaller, and one day it should disappear, all be dust. And that's when one Asamkaya Kalpa is over. So if we practice and we die and we are reborn, we continue to die, and at that time we are not Buddhas, but 1/3 of the way we have done. We have to wait for that angel and do the same procedure 3 times.
I read in years it's like more than 5 billion.
How did you calculate that?
No, I didn't.
Did they experiment?
No, just Tibetan.
Yeah. It sounds reasonable, yeah.
Sounds not right.
So, the Buddhist idea is that we can all become enlightened. It's possible. It's possible, but it's not so easy. It takes a lot of time. Basically what I just said. This granite block has to be reduced to dust 3 times. Then you become. It's not impossible. For anybody it's possible, but you have to invest a lot of time. And often in Zen, this time is incredibly reduced to the extent that people say, well, if you want to become a Buddha, go there and sit. The same moment you're already a Buddha. So in Zen, if somebody asks you, well, when will this granite block be reduced to dust? The answer would be now. Now is the time to reduce the block to dust. But here in this text, in the Hotsubo Daishin, Dogen is more conservative and says, don't expect to become a Buddha at all. Just establish Bodhimind now and for endless. First he says Asamkaya Kalpa, which is already a long amount of time, 5 billion years I just heard. But then in the next sentence he goes on, in some cases we practice for countless kalpas. Even longer than that, countless kalpas, and become a Buddha. And then the third sentence, in other cases we practice for countless kalpas to make living beings cross over before us, finally not becoming a Buddha ourselves, but only taking across living beings and benefiting living beings. So first, you're still making a compromise. Okay, if you establish Bodhimind and help living beings, after that granite block is reduced to dust 3 times, you can expect to enter nirvana yourself. Then he's making one step further and says, well, even then, you might have to put on in even more, countless kalpas, and then become Buddha. And then third sentence he says, well, it's best if you don't expect to become a Buddha at all. But just help other beings to cross over and become Buddha, without expecting to become Buddha yourself. This accords with the attitude of delight in Bodhi. In general, the Bodhi mind ceaselessly operates through the 3 forms of behavior, so that all living beings may somehow be caused to establish the Bodhi mind and be led to the Buddha's truth. Vainly to confer worldly pleasures is not to benefit living beings. So what does it mean to save a living being or to help living beings? This sentence here is very important. That the ultimate aim, when you establish Bodhimind and you say, I shall not be saved myself, I want to save others first, is that you try to help these other beings to establish the same mind, to arouse the same mind. That means if I wanted to help Joseph, then I might be nice to him sometimes. I might offer him a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. But basically my final aim would be to help Joseph forget about himself and help other beings. So the aim of the Bodhisattva at first is I don't need to be saved. I don't need to be liberated. I want to liberate others. But then the next step is, how do I liberate others? I help these people to have the same wish and also forget about their liberation and help again other people. It's not just simply that I am nice to other people or I help these people so that they feel comfortable, but rather one step ahead, I cause these people to forget about their own happiness, about their own liberation, about their own enlightenment, and also see, oh, there's lots of suffering around. What can I do about those people? And here the text, the Dogen Zenji, the original Shobogenzo continues. I've cut this out. And the next sentence comes from a later part of the chapter. Benefiting living beings means causing living beings to establish the will to deliver others before they attain their own deliverance. So once more, if I try to help others, it means that I help these people so that they also forget about themselves and try to deliver others before they themselves are delivered. So there's a kind of chain reaction going on here. We should not expect to become Buddha by virtue of having established the will to deliver others before we ourselves attain deliverance. That is important, and Dogen Zenji comes back to that at the end of the chapter. The traditional idea is our aim should be to become Buddhas and enter Nirvana. For that we have 100 great kalpas or 3 Asankaya kalpas. Very long time. And this time we need to use to practice as bodhisattvas. So as bodhisattvas we train ourselves, we refine ourselves, and finally we become Buddhas ourselves. And Dogen here says you shouldn't hope that forgetting about yourselves and putting the salvation of other people above yourself will make you a Buddha. Because then you're only tricking yourself. You're not really forgetting about yourselves anymore. You say, well, okay, I forget myself for a while if I can become a Buddha later. This, Dogen says, shouldn't be the case. Benefiting living beings means causing living beings to establish the will to deliver others before they attain their own deliverance. We should not expect to become Buddha by virtue of having established the will to deliver others before we ourselves attain deliverance. Even if virtue which might make us Buddha has matured and is about to be consummated, we turn it toward living beings' realization of Buddha and attainment of the truth. So even if it should happen after 3 long kalpas that our karma gets so good and refined and we're so polished that we could enter Nirvana anytime, the door is open, Dogen says we don't do it. We use this virtue or karma or whatever to help other living beings. We don't enter Nirvana. And this is the last part of the chapter. I'm jumping here again. Sometimes in order to hinder a practitioner, celestial demons, papillas and the like, that's all kinds of demons and stuff, demons, devils and the like will take on the shape of a Buddha or will appear in the shape of a parent, a teacher or relatives, gods and so on, thus drawing near. They concoct fictions and prevail upon the Bodhisattva, saying, the Buddha's truth is far distant. You would suffer long hardships and experience the deepest sorrow. The better course is to resolve our own life and death first, and then to deliver living beings. So Dogen says it happens that we get advice like this. People come close and give us the advice that it's not so easy to understand Buddha's truth. First you need to understand yourself and to have to save yourself. You have to get enlightened yourself. How can you possibly help anybody before you don't get enlightened yourself? How can you try to get somebody to the other shore if you don't know where the other shore is? That makes sense. But Dogen says those are devils. And then the rest of the chapter is kind of devoted to kind of analyzing devils, where they come from, who they are. But once more, what the devil says makes sense. How can we help a person if we're not already liberated ourselves? First, we need to help ourselves, shouldn't we? How can we be a guide to somebody if we don't know the way ourselves? The problem being that only if we let go of this idea, I need to be saved first, I need to be liberated first, that we can help somebody. It's all about letting go of this idea. It's about my practice, it's about my enlightenment. And once I get it, I'm happy to share it. But first I need it myself. This is what keeps us from getting enlightened. This is what keeps us from staying in suffering. The idea I need to get out first. So although Dogen says don't expect to get saved yourself even for 3 long kalpas or 100 long kalpas, 5 billion years, the moment we let go of this idea I need to be saved, we experience that actually it's already there. I don't need to be saved anymore. A little bit like what you experience when you sit on the cushion and say, okay, if I have to die here, I'm going to die here. It will be okay. I'm going to die here. Muho is going to take care of the funeral afterwards. And in that moment you experience, oh, there's nothing. I'm fine. Zazen is doing Zazen. Zazen is doing Zazen for me. I don't have to take care of anything. The same with the Bodhisattva. The moment you say, okay, I can fall into hell, let me help at least one person or 2 persons or 3 persons to go to the other shore. That moment you realize that actually right now here you're already at the other shore. But only because you established that will. Only because you forgot about yourself, you realize, oh, I already have it. And as long as you think, well, first I need it for sure here, and then I'm going to communicate it to others. That's why you're never sure. You're never sure. What time do we have right now? 3 o'clock. 1 hour into my talk. Okay. So much about maybe Hotsubo Daishi in this chapter. Oh, thank you. I could get into more details. One interesting part of the Hotsubo Daishin chapter is Dogen's theory of time. If you're into philosophy and Dogen and time, he develops a very special theory of time, and he calculates how many kshanas we have during the day. And the ksana is the minimum amount of time, kind of a quantum time. And again, a funny calculation, and he says there's 6,400,990,980 kshanas, which proves to be a calculating mistake, because he didn't have an abacus with him, I think. The real number is, what was the real number? 6,480,000. So, but you can check in the Dutch, either the Esther site or the Dutch version of the Antaisio homepage. If you're interested, you go to the Shobogenzo, you go to Hotsubo Daishin, and there's a footnote in the center of the chapter, and I explain why it's a calculating mistake. But that doesn't need to bother us now. Next, I would like to move on to another chapter of the Shobogenzo, Bodhisatta Shishoho, where Dogen talks.
Excuse me.
Yes.
It's maybe still interesting that comes down to about 70,000 times a second.
It's about 100th of a second. 6,400,480,000 divided by how many seconds do we have in a day?
24 times 60 times 60.
I think it's 0.016 seconds is one ksana.
So to give you an idea that we're talking about here and now, about a moment.
Yeah.
How long is a moment?
So to be exact, we would have 60 moments in 1 second.
60.
So Dogen says when it comes to 100 ksana, we realize it. We are able to distinguish units of 100 ksana, which would be a little more than a second. Then we see there's something moving, there's something happening, there's a light flashing on and off. But when it's a hundredth of a second, we don't realize it anymore. Or like when we see a movie, we have 24 a second, and we don't see that it's separate pictures. We think we see a moving picture. And if we wouldn't know that actually that's separate pictures, we wouldn't believe it. And that's basically the theory that Dogen develops there. Like, there's no moment, there's no movement. And there's, like in Genjo Koan, life is not turning to death. Death is not turning to life. Spring is not turning to summer, because spring is only spring, here and now. There's no movement, there's no development. And one question is, why does he need this theory of time in the Hotsubo Daishin chapter? Because obviously it's not related to Bodhimind. And I think he needs the theory here to make it plausible that we can establish this mind here and now if we want to. Because if we think about karma, and for example these long periods of kalpa times, then being the persons which we are, born in ignorance, greed, craving, how can we possibly establish Bodhimind? Being determined by karma, our mind being completely kind of determined by the karmic seeds coming from the so-called, what was it, the eighth consciousness, the store consciousness. And that's, I think, where this time theory comes into play. Because this picture right here now is completely independent of what came before and what comes after. If we want to establish Bodhimind in this moment, we can. We're free to do so. There's nothing that, binds us. There's no karmic bonds from the past. There's nothing in the future that would prevent us to establish Bodhimind right here and now. So that's why I think he comes up with this kind of out-of-text context with there's 100 ksanas in each second, or 60. When you snip your fingers, there's 65 ksanas passing, he says. But to go on to the practical aspect of Bodhi-mind, how does it work in our daily life? How do we practice it? I would like to read some short quotes from a different chapter of Shobogenzo, which is Bodhisatta Shishoho. In the Nishijima translation, 4 elements of a bodhisattva's social relations. First is free giving, or dana. You all know, or most of you know the word dana, which means giving. First is free giving. Second is kind speech. Or if you look at the Dutch translation, which is based on the German woorden van de liefde, words of love, would also be a more literal translation. Words of love. Third is helpful conduct. Fourth is cooperation. Cooperation, one possibility here. Eenwoorden, to become one, would be another one. The Japanese is doji. Do means the same, and ji means matter, same matter. In German, there's this expression which means eine Sache machen. Eine Sache machen, to kind of, or when you tug of war, pulling the same string. That's kind of what I think is meant here with cooperation. Of course, cooperation also has this meaning. So in this chapter, Dogen Zenji investigates 4 aspects of a bodhisattva relating to other beings out of Bodhimind. The word Bodhimind doesn't appear here, but it's all about Bodhimind. First, about giving. All of these 4 paragraphs come from different spots of the chapter. When we offer flowers from distant mountains to the Tathagata, and when we donate treasures accumulated in our past life to living beings, whether the gift is dharma or material objects, in each case we are originally endowed with the virtue that accompanies free giving. There's a Buddhist principle that even if things are not our own, this does not hinder our free giving. Het is zelfs toegestaan te geven wat niet van jou is. Van jou is. Het is zelfs toegestaan te geven wat niet van jou is. That's a little bit funny, because in Buddhism there's one among 10 precepts which says you shouldn't steal. So how can you give something that doesn't belong to you? How can you give something that's not your property? But then the other way around, there's this famous anarchist saying, property is theft. And in a way that's also true for Buddhism. We don't have property. What property do we have? What does belong to us? For example, people talk a lot about my time. But all of us, we have 24 hours a day. How much of that does belong to us? In a way, it's all our time, isn't it? When we do Zazen, that's my time. When I do Zazen, that's my time. When I do Sangha, it's my time. When I sleep, it's my time. There's nothing in the 24 hours of the day that's not my time. But can I really claim this as my property? No, I mean, I have no right, in a way, I have no right to be still alive today. I could have died yesterday. I could die tomorrow. If I'm still alive tomorrow, in a way, it's a present. I have no right to claim that as my time. The 24 hours that I might have tomorrow, if I can enjoy them, it's not my time. It's something that I received. Or the space, my room, my house. But did we create this space? Space we received. This body we received at birth, but we're very attached to it. Is it my body? Even with money, and we're pretty sure that this money belongs to us, that we have in our purse, because we got it for our work. We did big effort, so we worked, we got the money. But okay, still, the time which we invested was not my time, so I can't claim my time. The strength, the energy I put in there, where came the energy from? Did I generate the energy, or where did it come from? So even with the work, we can hardly say that it belongs to me. It's my work, so I should get money for this. For a Buddhist monk, it's even easier to understand, because my main source of income is begging. I stand on the street and I hold my bowl and people put money in there. And legally, probably the moment the money goes into my bowl, legally it's my money. Probably. And sometimes there's people who take out money. It helps. It happens very seldom, but once every couple of weeks or so, somebody comes and takes out money off the bowl. And I'm wondering, what should I do? Because I mean, the people that put it in there, they put it in there for the purpose of Buddhism. So in a way, I could say, well, I have the responsibility to protect that money. It's not for him; it's for me, because I'm practicing Buddhism. But on the other way around, you can't really do that, because the idea of this belonging to you doesn't occur in this situation. It's impossible. When you see there's always money flowing in, and from time to time there's something flowing out, you can't hardly say, no, keep it in there. But then if you put it in your purse and it stays in the purse for a while, you get very attached to it. And you develop, this is my money. And it's funny. But if you look at where it originally came from, it all came from somewhere which didn't belong to you. This body didn't belong to me. The time, the space, or the words which I'm saying, where do they come from? A part of it is from Dogen, a part of it I got from books, a part of it maybe my own ideas, but even these own ideas, where do they come from? Do they belong to me? So not only is it allowed to give something that does not belong to you, but actually we have no other choice but give. We always give things that don't belong to us, because there's nothing that we can claim. So the act of giving in the end means to forget about property, forget about the idea, this belongs to me, this is my thing. And when we can forget that, it becomes very easy. Giving becomes very easy, because there's nothing that we should hold back. Or another example of giving can be to accept what is offered. To give, of course, can mean to give something, but might be a little funny example. But I was vegetarian before I came to Japan. Before I became Buddhist, I was vegetarian. And I stopped being vegetarian when I became a Buddhist. The reason is that when you're living in a monastery in Antaiji, 90%, 95% of the food is vegetarian. The stuff that we grow in the fields is what we eat. But from time to time, people donate meat or they donate fish. And in the beginning I said, no, I don't want to eat that. Because I never ate meat or fish even when I was a child. I didn't like it for whatever reason. I don't like this. And they made a surprised face. But you're a monk. How can you refuse this donation? In Buddhism we have a precept not to kill. When you say I don't want this, you're killing the goodwill of the person who makes the donation. You're killing the food. Put yourself in the position of the fish, or put yourself in the position of the animal. Somebody killed you, that's bad. But now if you knew you're dead, you don't know. But suppose you were an animal, you were killed, and you know you're sitting on a plate of a Buddhist monk, and that monk says, oh no, I don't want to eat this. Please give this to the cat. Maybe you're in paradise, maybe in hell. Probably you wouldn't be happy to see that scene. The best thing you can do for the animal is you accept it, and that's also an act of giving. And you're not giving something that belongs to you. You're giving. Just pure giving, receiving. Okay, maybe so much for the time being, for giving. The next is kind speech. Kind speech means, when meeting living beings, first of all to feel compassion for them and to offer caring and loving words. Broadly, it is there being no rude or bad words. To hear kind speech spoken to us directly makes the face happy and the mind joyful. To hear kind speech indirectly etches an impression in the heart and in the soul. Remember, kind speech arises from a loving mind, and the seed of a loving mind is compassion. We should learn that kind speech has the power to turn around the heavens. It is not merely the praise of ability. The difficult thing here is the application to real life. When you have the opportunity to praise somebody, be kind to them, be nice to them, say nice words, and you can do that, it's always a wonderful experience. But then there's also lots of cases where you need to offer criticism, voice criticism. Sometimes in very direct words, when the first time you say it in a soft way, maybe the first time you don't say anything, you give an example. The example is ignored. At the same time, the next time you say it in a soft way, still no effect. One point you feel, now here I have to say something in very direct way. Can this also be an expression of kind words? I would hope so. Otherwise, what I do most of the time in Antaiji is against this. And Dogen Zenji says here, well, it's not merely the praise of ability. So just as the Bodhisattva is not merely trying to help people, but trying to help them to go one step beyond and forget about themselves and help others. Kind words also sometimes can be shocking words to wake up people. And sometimes you hear also the explanation, when a Buddhist master gets angry, it's only the words which are angry in his heart, deep in his heart. He's not angry at all. Which I don't know about other Buddhist masters, but in my case, to be honest, actually also often there's anger. So when I seem to be, usually here during the summer also, people ask me, are you always so friendly and so relaxed? Well, the truth is in Antaiji, not at all. If you knew me in Antaiji, often I'm also angry. So without looking for, how do you say, excuses now, I try to read this also as a reminder for myself. Kind words can also be sometimes critical words, but criticism is useless if it's not expressed in a way that the other person is able to listen to it. And even the best criticism, if it's not expressed in the right way, will only fall on closed ears. So that's something I have to remind myself. Next point is helpful conduct. Means utilizing skillful means to benefit living beings, high or low. For example, by looking into the distant and near future and employing expedient means to benefit them. People have taken pity on stricken turtles and taken care of sick sparrows. When they saw the stricken turtle and the sick sparrow, they did not seek any reward from the turtle and the sparrow. They were motivated solely by helpful conduct itself. Stupid people think that if we put the benefit of others first, our own benefit will be eliminated or reduced. This is not true. Helpful conduct is the whole Dharma. Helpful conduct is the whole Dharma here means that me and the others are not separated. So it's not that if I help Joseph without expecting anything in return from Joseph, that I'm losing something. I'm losing part of my time and my energy because I have to invest it to Joseph. But rather because this helping comes out of a feeling of connectedness. When I'm helping Joseph, I'm helping myself. Most obvious example is again the mother and the child. When the mother feeds the baby, the mother doesn't expect the baby to say thank you, but the mother is happy seeing that their baby is happy. That's what meant by the whole Dharma. There's only one Dharma, and the connectedness. Out of connectedness, we become able to help. Therefore, the last sentence, it universally benefits self and others. We are not only helping others when we help others, we are actually helping ourselves when we help others. Last point, cooperation means not being contrary. It's not being contrary to oneself and not being contrary to others. So we allow ourselves to be ourselves, and thus we can allow others to be others. When we know cooperation, self and others are oneness, and thus we become one. We don't artificially force ourselves to be like the others, and we don't force artificially the others to be like us. There may be a principle of after letting others identify with us, then letting ourselves identify with others. But first, before that comes, first, we are not contrary to oneself, ourselves. We are ourselves, and we let the others be the others. The relations between self and others are, depending on the occasion, without limit. The Kanchi, which is an old Confucian text, says, "The sea does not refuse water. Therefore, it is able to realize its greatness." You know that from Tenzo Kyokun, great mind. Mountains do not refuse earth. Therefore, they are able to realize their height. That means we accept anything. Just as during the Zen, you accept the pain, you accept the frustration, you accept the tiredness, you accept the anger, all of that. You let the sheep eat all of the grass on your meadow. And that's why the meadow is so healthy and green. Because enlightened rulers do not hate people, they realize a large following. A large following means a nation. An enlightened ruler may mean an emperor. Emperors do not hate the people. They do not hate the people, but that does not mean that there's no reward and punishment. Even if there's reward and punishment, there's no hatred for the people. I think Dogen is talking here about the Sangha and the teacher in the Sangha. I don't know if he's also talking about state affairs. But he's talking about the teacher of a Sangha. If the teacher in the Sangha is accepting and understands the Sangha, he will have a large follower. If he has big mind, a mind that is open like the ocean, like the mountains. If he doesn't have a large following, like I at Antaiji, probably it's a sign that big mind isn't developed well enough. But anyway, that's how a teacher should be. Still, doesn't mean there's no reward and punishment. Doesn't mean that there's no rules in the Sangha. In since 2,500 years ago, we have a Vinaya set of rules, and in Southern Buddhism, it has been preserved more or less the same. In Mahayana Buddhism, it's in constant change. Even today in Antaj, you are still changing the rules all the time, but that doesn't mean that rules are not important. There are rules. Even today, there are maybe people who seek the truth with no expectation of reward, but this is beyond the thinking of stupid men. Because enlightened rulers are enlightened, they do not hate people. Although people always have the will to form a nation and to find an enlightened ruler. The following is important. Few completely understand the truth of an enlightened ruler being an enlightened ruler. Therefore, they are glad simply not to be hated by the enlightened ruler, while never recognizing that they themselves do not hate the enlightened ruler. What does he talk about here? Again, I think he's talking about a teacher. And people in the Sangha form together and they're looking for a good teacher. And we wish we had the chance to study under somebody like Shakyamuni 2,500 years ago. Unfortunately, we were not born in time. So we are looking maybe for the most enlightened teacher around. And we're worried when we find a teacher, is he really so enlightened? Maybe there's a more enlightened teacher somewhere else. And of course, it's important that we find a teacher that has preferably a mind like the ocean or like a mountain that accepts and understands the Sangha. And the Sangha is happy about that. But Dogen says the Sangha, often the members of the Sangha don't understand that they actually are doing or have to do the same thing. They create the teacher. Just as Dogen did with Tendo Nyojo. I don't know how big the following was of Tendo Nyojo. But today, Tendo Nyojo is remembered only in Japan, because only Dogen had an experience there. And with the Buddha, he had thousands of disciples, but we know only of Mahakashapa that he transmitted the truth, and then to Ananda. About the other thousands of people, we don't hear anything. Or with some, like Devadatta, we know that he actually left the Buddha because he was disappointed. He didn't see any truth and any meaning in the Buddha's practice. With Christianity, it's the same. There were 12 apostles, disciples of Jesus. The one he hears most of, or the best news we hear from Peter, he was the most trusted. And Judas was the one who kind of betrayed him, sold him. And even Peter then said 3 times, I don't know this guy. So actually that we know about Jesus today is to a big part thanks to Paul, who never met Jesus. And in a way we could say he invented Jesus. And if we agree with Paul's invention of Jesus or not is a different question. But again, it shows how important it is how you relate to the teacher and how much your attitude toward the teacher determines what the teacher is. Thus, the truth of cooperation exists both for enlightened rulers and ignorant people. And this is why cooperation is the conduct and the vow of Bodhisattva. Cooperation, or as Dogen said before in the Hotsubo Daishin chapter, ways have to cross and hearts have to communicate. We should face all things only with gentle faces. That's a nice sentence here at the end. And then the quote at the end of the page in, maybe again I try once more in Netherlands, in Dutch. Hemel en aarde geven zichzelf. Lucht, water, planten, dieren en mensen geven zichzelf. In dit geven van de een aan jeder andere leven wij. Heaven and earth give themselves, air, water, plants, animals and humans give themselves. It is in this giving themselves to each other that we actually live. A quote by Kodo Sawaki in which he explains this way of giving that I was talking about here. A way of giving that actually we have no other choice but give ourselves. The question is, do we do that out of our own determination, or do we cling to something that actually we can't hold in the end? Now I want to, before you have the Of course, you can also ask questions after this. First, 3 questions from my side, which I want to discuss. Can you still hear me? Can you hear me? Fun? A bit. Okay, I'll shout. Question 1. Where are the limits of Bodhisattva practice? How much are we supposed to do? For example, in the Bible, when somebody slaps your right half of the face, you're supposed to offer the left. What if that person also slaps the left half? Do you go on and offer the right one again? How far do we go with Bodhisattva practice? Aren't there limits in daily life to this? Second question. If Bodhisattva practice and Bodhimind is so important, why do we do sessions? Why do we sit there for 2 days on the cushion? Do we have the time for that? Shouldn't we go and help people in the big cities or in the countryside, wherever? There are so many people who need our help. Why do we waste time doing the Zen? And the third question would be, what does a Bodhisattva actually do when he faces injustice? He's in a situation and he thinks what is going on here is not right. The first question, the limits. One thing I think is, of course there are limits. We reach our limits in daily life all the time. And we have to acknowledge those limits and be honest to ourselves. And when that's the case, when we've reached the limits, we often have to communicate that and say, sorry, but I can't help you any further than this. But then we also have to remind ourselves that Bodhisattva practice means to help other people be Bodhisattvas themselves. It's not a kind of one-way thing that I'm Bodhisattva, I help people 24 hours a day, and that goes on and on forever. But rather, I try to help people help themselves. Or on the Antairi homepage, I say, like, you have to wipe your own ass. I don't understand it as my job to wipe people's asses all the time. There's once that happened when we went begging to Osaka. We went to Osaka for 1 week and we stayed in a cheap hotel. And on the way back to the hotel, the train was very crowded. And in Japan, when the trains are crowded, they're really packed. You can't get out of there if you're not standing close to the entrance. So at the station where we had to get out, all of us could get out except for one woman. She was left behind on the train, but she knew where the hotel is. So I wasn't worried. And Japan is a safe country, so eventually, in the worst case, you have to get out at the last stop and then you take the next train the way back. But anyway, you'll get back to the station and she'll find the hotel because she knows where the hotel is. I wasn't worried. We went back to the hotel. 20 minutes later she comes. Everything fine, I thought, but she's angry. Why didn't you look for me? Why didn't you call the police? I could have been kidnapped. I said, no, I don't think so. I was sure you find us. So she asked me, well, what would have happened when your 2 children were on that train? And my children were 3 and 4 years old at the time. So I had to admit, well, probably I would have been worried. Maybe I would even have called the police. And so she said, well, I thought so. You're more worried about your children than about me. And you call yourself a bodhisattva. But then there's a difference there. When I try to help a 3-year-old, I don't expect a 3-year-old to behave like a bodhisattva. But when she was older than me, actually, when I try to help adult people, I try to help them to be bodhisattvas. I don't try to relate to them as a father figure and allow them to be babies. So that also helps me to stay in my limits. If I would forget about that and say, okay, I'll be happy to be your daddy, I'll be happy to be this and that for you, I'll do anything you want me to, then I would in a couple of hours I would reach my limit, I'm sure. But that's not my aim. I'm trying to help people arouse Bodhimind. I'm not... well, I don't want to be their father, or also at Antaiji. There's some people who come there because they've heard, well, you don't have to pay at Antaiji, it's nice. It's like a youth hostel for free. And I take these people, they can stay there, but sooner or later they have to realize they are not guests. They have to do the same thing, they take part in the same labors. Sooner or later they are reminded from all sides that, well, it's a Zen monastery after all. And also sometimes happens, well, but you're all bodhisattvas, why don't you can just put up with me and accept me the way I am? Yes, that's one half of the truth, but the other half is when you come to Antaiji, we expect you to have Bodhimind and aim at living as a bodhisattva, and we help you to do that. We don't help you by washing your clothes for you and cooking for you and washing the dishes after you, cooking the tea for you, but rather we help you to do that for all others. So if you are there for 3 months, then actually in the beginning people explain your stuff and do things for you, but then you end up doing all that stuff for other people. And that's the way it's supposed to be. But you not only help these people, but then help them to help others again. So that's one thing that contains it in the limits. So it's not one thing that I always kind of wipe people's asses. No, my idea is I try to give an example of what it means to wipe your ass. And if people don't want to learn from the example, okay, then I teach them with words. And if kind speech doesn't help, then harsh words. And, well, hopefully that works. The second question, why do we sit zazen if we could be doing bodhisattva work right now? One answer, first answer is related also to the limits aspects. I think for me in my life I needed stable axis. If my life, the 24 hours would be a wheel, a turning wheel, then the Zen would be the axis. And if that axis isn't stable, also the wheel would get out of focus, out of center. So even if I have the idea I would like to help people, intention alone isn't enough. You also need the strength to put that into practice. And the strength, in my case, without the Zen, I don't think I wouldn't have that strength. So that's one answer. We need a firm axis in our life. And for some people, 15 minutes zazen a day maybe is enough. For some people, 1 hour. In the case of Antaiji, we sit an average of 5 hours zazen, very strong axis. But I think I need that. And from time to time, a session also helps to get centered in one's life and remind oneself of Bodhimind, and also to generate the strength. You need to practice that. The other half of the answer, which is maybe even more important, is do we do zazen first and then we help people? I don't know about you, but I couldn't sit a session like this by myself. If, for example, Esther did the organization, and about 1 week, 2 weeks ago, she said, I'm not going to do it. It's not worth the effort, and I have no money, and I don't want to do it anymore. And I said, great. Then I have 3 days off. Perfect. Of course, I could also have said, well, if you don't organize the session, I'm going to sit here alone. It would have been an option, but I don't think I could have done it. I couldn't have motivated myself to do it alone. The option would have been there. So I'm glad that Esther did it, the organization. I'm glad you all participated because you helped me to do the session. So it's not that you do the Zen first to prepare yourself to help people later, but when you do the Zen, you're already helping people because most people, or maybe all of us, couldn't do it alone. That's the point when I said today, you do not sit alone. Means none of us we're doing the Zen there in our own practice world, but our Zen influences the whole Zen in the room. Everybody in the room profits from our Zen, and each of us profits from the Zen of everybody. That's why it's also important that everybody is there. even if you're in pain, even if you're tired, even if you would rather go to sleep early. It's important that you're there because you're not doing it for yourself, you're doing it also for everybody else. So participating in session is not something you do for yourself only. You're also doing it for everybody else. If it weren't that way, then you could do session in your own room, in your living room at home. You can't do that because you need the help of the Sangha. And when you join the Sangha, you're also helping the Sangha. And you should have that attitude. I'm not doing that alone, but I do it for the others. Otherwise, you're just like somebody who's using the Sangha whenever you need the Sangha, but then when the Sangha needs you, you're out. That shouldn't be the case.
I think the influence goes beyond the dojo also.
Of course, of course.
You know the research that was done in Jerusalem?
No.
That I don't know how well this research was done. So. But they measured the amount of people that was meditating on a day, and then they compared it to the amount of violence, the amount of incidents. And it was a perfect line, like they followed each other perfectly. But again, I don't know...
the amount of silence in that area, or violence in that area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, yeah, it was like, it went parallel with each other. I should look it up again.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't know how well this research was done methodically.
I don't know either. Usually, though, personally, I try to stay out of this kind of magic vibrations stuff and so on. But
It's got nothing. It's not magic. It's just,
but why the people around, they don't know about the session, or do they?
No. No, it was just.
So why, for example, if there wouldn't have been a session, I would have shot my neighbor. Well, I'm not participating in the session, of course. There's a session going on. I wanted to shoot my neighbor, but there's a session going on there. I don't even know about it, but there's something.
That's the idea, yes.
Yeah. If that's true, that's great. But
Again, I don't know how well this research was done. How?
Yeah, no, it's great to hear. We don't know who Keith might have killed somebody during these 3 days. Thanks to us, he stays in his office.
No, but personally, I do believe in something like collective consciousness.
Yeah, it's of course. Yeah, Jungian philosophy is possible. Yeah.
No, but there's research also.
Yes.
Also supporting this.
Yes.
Like when they teach a group of children somewhere in the world a song, and they teach the same song to a different group of kids somewhere else in the world,
Yes.
the second group learns the song faster.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there is actually, and it's no magic involved.
Well, depends on what you call magic, but at least it's something that's not easy to explain.
Yeah, okay.
Of course, if you have the common consciousness, then you can explain it by that. But okay. No, I sorry, I didn't want to make fun of what you said.
Again, I don't know how good this research is. Maybe it's very easy to mess around with data. But besides that, I'm convinced that by doing such you do something to your environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the people inside the environment. That I am. Well, that's.
Yes.
No, why would it be limited to the dojo? So then where are the limits of that state that influences the dojo? And then it doesn't travel outside of the dojo. That's why would that be?
Well, from my own personal experience, the input I get through my six senses, the sixth sense in Buddhism is kind of what you're thinking, basically, the thinking apparatus and the five senses. For me, that's very strong. And I can't deny that there might be other influences. For example, there's the store consciousness, karmic conditioning from, I don't know, yesterday, 10 years ago, maybe past life, I don't know about that. But then what you're saying now seems to hint at there's something beyond that, or there's something on a different area. It's not the six senses, it's also not the store consciousness. Or
I would call collective.
Collective store
Usually
consciousness.
collective consciousness.
Okay, so good.
It's what you send, the vibrations you send, and it's what you get. It has a relation. So
I mean, yeah.
Universal law of attraction and.
Then my next question is how far does it reach? So I don't know the study in Israel, but is it something local? Like, does our session here have stronger effects in Limburg than in other parts of the world, or?
No idea.
It's very specific.
So I'd like to leave that open. So I'm in no position to deny that such effects exist. But as for example with rebirth, my question is always, and nobody can answer me that, that kind of karmic seeds remain after I die. Okay, no problem. My body doesn't dissolve into nothing. My body dissolves into many factors, and part of that is sucked up by plants, part of that becomes part of the air and the atmosphere. So if my mental constitution after my death remains, I have no problems with that. But why is that supposed to be inherited by a new living being rather than be distributed over countless numbers of living beings?
Oh, but there is also theories that it is carried in more.
More people, but you never hear about it. Like with the lamas, for example. If there's two lamas, it's a big issue in Tibetan Buddhism. If there's two that are supposed to be the incarnation, for me, I would say, well, why not? I mean, it could be 50 or 100 people being reincarnated.
I did read sometimes about that it would be distributed over more people. Then it would come.
Yeah, but from my point of view, it should always be the case. And not only people, it should be plants, it should be animals. The person should be smeared all over the universe. How come there's 3 people or 2 people?
Well, that's what happens when you reach Nirvana. That's what. You have to wait a little bit. Then you spread.
Well, I thought that when you reach Nirvana that the karmic seeds have disappeared.
Yeah, and then you.
Then you can't be smeared over the universe. You disappear.
The karmic seeds.
Yeah. But okay. Back to the last question, which is maybe the most problematic. So we're in a situation we see injustice. But it could also be that it's only my personal thought and my attachment to right and wrong that makes me think it's injustice. Maybe I should just forget about my own view and let it be. Just as in those chapters here, Dogen also, sometimes she seems to hint that you just let yourself be and you let others be. And that can also be a form of helping and giving, that you do not influence the situation. And there's that's on the first three pages in several languages. You have that quote from Shotoku Taishi, the guy who introduced Buddhism into Japan around the year 600. And he wrote a constitution for Japan, which is called the 17-article constitution. And the quote here is Article 10. Maybe I'll try the Dutch once more. Waarom stoort het ons dat anderen anders denken dan ons? Hebben we niet allemaal onze eigen mening en denkt niet iedere geest op zijn eigen manier? Wat jij denkt dat goed is, vind ik niet goed. Wat ik denk dat goed is, vind jij niet goed. Goed. Wie heeft hier de wijsheid in pacht? Weet je het zeker dat ik me vergis? Kan ik zeker van zijn dat jij je vergist. Zijn we niet beiden maar heel gewone mensen. And that's based on my German translation, which is a little bit colloquial. The English one is on the bottom of the third page. Let us control ourselves and not be resentful when others disagree with us, for all men have hearts and each heart has its own learnings. The right of others is our wrong and our right is their wrong. We are not unquestionably sages, nor are they unquestionably fools. Both of us are simply ordinary men. How can anyone lay down a rule by which to distinguish right from wrong? For we are all wise sometimes and foolish at others. Therefore, though others give way to anger, let us, on the contrary, dread our own faults. Though we may think we alone are in the right, let us follow the majority and act like them. So this is a very Japanese way of thinking, which is probably much less familiar to us in our way of thinking. We have an idea of right and wrong, but it's not necessarily the same as other people's idea of right and wrong. And often the best thing we can do to help a situation is to forget about our idea of right and wrong and just adapt to the situation. Or here, in the end, it says follow the majority. Because although everybody thinks he's right and what he's doing is right and what he's saying is right, because he doesn't allow the opinion of the others, that's why conflicts arise. And sometimes we think for example, we fight for peace, but actually it's our fighting that destroys the peace. And just letting things be, things would be much more peaceful. But then, is this the case all the time? Or is this a solution to all problems? Then of course the answer is no. If we, although we think we alone are on the right, follow the majority and act like them all of the times, what happens if the majority is wrong? For example, if you come from Germany, in German history, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, there's an obvious example where nobody or almost nobody stood up and says what's going on here is wrong. Everybody just followed along with the majority. In an example like that, of course, a bodhisattva has to stand up and say, no, something is wrong here. And there's other situations where you have to question yourself and say, well, this looks wrong to me, but maybe my yardstick is wrong. Maybe the situation is perfectly right. And it's very hard to discern, I think, in each situation what to do. You have to both have courage, see there's a situation around you clearly, but also have to invest your own motives. Am I just following my own ego? Am I just following my own righteousness? Or is there clearly a case of injustice involved here? So there's no kind of clear textbook answer to this question. What shall a bodhisattva do in each situation? Depends on the situation. A little bit like Joseph mentioned the Sendaba chapter in Shobo Genzo the other day in Nijmegen. There's a chapter in the Shobo Genzo called Osaku Sendaba. The king asked for Sendaba. And it's not here on the papers, but you can, in the internet, you have German translation, Dutch translation on the Antaiji homepage. The chapter starts with a quote from a sutra, and there's a king. And the king usually asks for Sendaba. But the word Sendaba, or in Sanskrit Saindava, has 4 different meanings. It can mean bowl, it can mean water, it can mean salt, and it can mean horse. So if the king is asking for sendaba, what am I supposed to bring? And in the sutras, that's all very easy. If the king is sitting down at the table and looks hungry, then you bring him a bowl. And if he's in the middle of the meal and he asks for sendaba, you bring him salt. If he's finished the meal and he asks for sendaba, bring him water. And when he gets up and wants to go to town and he is asking for sendaba, you bring the horse. But often then in real life it's not so easy. You don't know what to do. Like in Antaisi, that was before I came, the teacher, my teacher's teacher, he was kind of a pretty rude guy, I hear. Or I met him. He can be very outspoken and short-tempered. And he was participating in Samu one day. I don't know, they were building something and he needed a tool. And all he said is, bring me that tool. Bring me that tool, quick. And in that situation, you can't ask, well, please, master, tell me what tool. At least in Japan, you don't say that. But if you say it, or you say, well, we've been working here all day together, you don't even know what tool I need. Or one of my Dharma brothers, he was trained as a sushi cook before he came to Antaisi and became a monk. And he said, well, as a sushi cook, the first couple of months, they didn't teach him anything. They didn't teach him anything. He was always doing the dishes or cleaning the floor. No teaching. And then one day they said, today you do the sushi. You're responsible for the sushi today. And again, no teaching. And he wasn't supposed to ask, well, then please tell me what to do and I'll do it. But if he had said that, they would say, well, what have you been doing all those months? Where were you? And often in life, that's exactly the position we are in. We try to live like bodhisattvas, we try to do our best, but we don't really exactly know what to do, and nobody explains anything to us. Or like, even with a session like this, often people are doing something, we have nothing to do, we don't know, can we help, what can we help, nobody tells me something, so I stand around. And that's not a way of giving sendaba. So in each situation we have to invest. What exactly would be sendaba in this situation? Do I have to produce a bowl, or is it water or salt, or maybe a horse? What's the tool that is asked for? What role can I play here to help the situation? Is it best in this situation to just take myself back, or do I have to step forward and take responsibility for the action? That's the koan of our lives, basically. And that's what I want to finish the lecture with. And now you're welcome to ask questions or give your own opinions, offer criticism. Please. Yes, please.
I have a question. You usually say you have to die on your cushion. You said it several times. And then I was wondering, if you only practice half an hour a day, how are you going to die on your cushion? Or how? Yeah, seems to limit the probability. And what would that mean for practicing Zen in the West?
I mean, one thing is you're not actually literally dying. So if you're very good at letting go, you can let go of yourselves in a minute, in 10 seconds. You can completely let go of yourselves. You don't even have to sit for that. But of course, it's easier if you actually reach some kind of limit. You're standing in front of a wall, there's no way to get through, or you're standing on top of that 100-foot pole. It's not philosophy, but you actually feel like, now I'm here and I have to take one more step, but it's impossible. I die if I take this step. And as you said, sitting 30 minutes each day might not take you to that point. that's why I think sessions are necessary. Other people say it's not necessary. Some people say, well, 30 minutes a day is what you need, and you need nothing else. I think, at least for me, it wouldn't have been enough. Even now, I don't know if 30 minutes a day would be enough. I haven't tried. Might be worth.
No.
Might be worth trying.
People or the lay person in the West who are working don't have time to do sport. So
yeah, but that's why you have sessions like this on a weekend. You take off for a week, and if you're still not satisfied with that, you have to make up your mind. What is more important? That I have a happy work life and a happy family life, but I can sit only 30 minutes? Or do I take the step and become, for example, a monk? Go to a monastery in Japan. Like often people ask me, well, how can I have the same thing, the same experience, the same life that you have here in Antaiji, but with my work life and my family? If that would be possible, then we wouldn't need places like Antaiji. I don't say that everybody needs to practice in that kind of environment with a lot of sesshin, but for some people, like myself, it's necessary. And if you ask me, well, how is it possible, but without the monastery and without the sesshin? I don't think it's possible. You can't have exactly the same. Just like on the internet, in one of the articles, I made the comparison, like when you take this axis and the wheel. When you want to drive a bicycle, you don't need the axis that you need for a 20-ton truck, for example. But on the other hand, if you want to drive a 20-ton truck, you can't make with a bicycle axis. So it depends on how much you need or what you want to do with it. And for some people, 30 minutes a day is completely fine. It gives them relaxation, it gives them the stability they need, makes them function at the workplace, makes them function in the family. And for those, I have no reason to say, no, it's not enough, you should go to Antaiji. But other people, they say it's just not enough. It's just not enough, I need more than that. And then, well, there's places like Antaiji for that.
Yeah, just what was modeling that there are plenty of situations where you reach your limits in daily life. No? So why not utilize those situations?
Of course. So, if you manage to understand, for example, the conflicts at work or the conflicts in family, also as situations where you stand on top of the 100-foot pole and you understand a fight that you have with your wife as an opportunity to let go and take one step further, of course. Can be better practice than in session where you sit 15 hours like this and afterwards you feel, oh, I done it, I'm a good guy. You're clinging to the pole. In that respect, maybe having stayed home with the wife and the family and just being a nice father for a weekend can be better practice sometimes. That's also true. Other questions? Yes.
When we started the session, you explained that you don't give Kyosaku
Yes.
a lot in Antaiji.
Yes.
Because the idea in Antaiji is that you do Zazen on your own. So you shouldn't get too much help.
No choice.
But that's in a way contradictionary then to the Bodhisattva ideal that you need to help the other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the main reason why I reintroduced it. Like Uchiyama said, we will use session without toys, and Kyosaku is a toy. So, no Kyosaku. And my opinion is Kyosaku can become a toy when you make it into a toy. But it doesn't have to be a toy. It depends on what you do with it. And Kyosaku can be a help. And also, you don't know if you're sitting straight, so it can be a help if somebody checks the posture from time to time. So now, not too often, like on a 5-day session I go around twice, during the 1-day sessions I go around once, that's all. So I go around 6 times a month, that's not too much. I could go around each time, of course, but then, well, you have this thing that even though people know I'm responsible for my practice, it's my zazen, I have to do it, nobody else can do it for me. There's always this thing that what impression does he have of me? This time he didn't correct me, I'm getting better. Oh, he corrected me, I'm there.
Yeah, but you really think people, that's a pretty low opinion of people's practice, I think.
Pardon?
I think that's a pretty low opinion of people's practice.
Well, that's how it was in my case when I sat in dojos with the Kyosaku.
Really?
I don't say everybody is like that, but that's my experience. That's what Uchiyama basically writes. That what's happening. That either you're trying to impress the Kyosaku man, or you're kind of using the Kyosaku man like, oh, I feel so dull. Like have him hit me, and maybe I feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's a responsibility you have to take them in zazen. It's not a reason not to do it. But my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. The question is, well, how often do you do it? No? How intensive?
It's not that I'm crazy about Kyosaku or anything. I was just wondering, because it's so contradictory. And related to that, I was wondering the fact that you sit also with your back towards, with your face to the wall. Does it come from the same idea?
Yeah, that also Uchiyama started that. Basically the same idea. Yeah, he's saying, well, I'm sitting there. You're sitting there. There's no difference. I'm not observing you during the Zen. I'm not observing your Zen.
That's not how I interpreted it. I find that it's a different experience when the master sits face towards. And my experience, it can also be a helping factor. That's why I wondered if it was based on the same idea.
I think so. So you have this basic conflict there, the bodhisattva practice. Up to which point do you actually actively help people, and when do you start to help people help themselves? That means you actively retreat. Say from this point on you have to walk on your own. In the case of Uchiyama, he said, well, I'm not facing inside, I'm facing towards the wall. And well, it doesn't mean that those that face inside they're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. You can also do that, but so in that respect, I'm following the Antaji tradition. I only face inside for the very first sitting during the session, then for the very last sitting, having to do with the Jikido carrying around the Kyosaku, and then we bow, stuff like that for that ceremony. So there's 2 sittings in each session where I face inside, and the rest I face the wall.
Do you experience that it's different for yourself?
There's no big difference. A little difference, yes, but I mean, in the case of Antaji, everybody's sitting lined up anyway. And here's the wall, and here's the big space, and there's the Buddha in the back. That means it actually doesn't matter which way direction you sit. If I sit facing this way, it's still the people are still here. The only difference being that now there's a huge, vast space in front of me, and there's the Buddha there. That's the only difference. So I don't know what the difference would be if there's also, well, sometimes if we're many people, there are people also sitting here. So I see a number of backs that usually otherwise I wouldn't see. But even then, if I see more people, I see more backs, then usually it doesn't make so much of a difference.
I guess the question comes from my own experience, because I teach zazen to kids at schools. And I have a small group at home. and it's a really, really different energy. And the kiss energy is much more powerful. It's like, it's a very feel difference. So that's why I was wondering about all the different dynamics of that.
And with the grown-ups, you're also facing inside the room?
Yeah, we also, they don't want to practice Zen.
Pardon?
They're not into Zen. So
everybody's facing inside.
Yeah.
Okay.
I prefer otherwise, but and with the kids as well. But the kids is just, it's just certain lines. I'm sure there's differences. I was just wondering how you experienced it. And it actually harks back as well to the question of what happens during Zazen for your environment. If all those things, if you can feel.
Yeah, well, like as you know, in Rinzai, everybody's sitting inside.
Yeah, I just heard it, didn't
Well, only in Japanese Rinzai, because it used to be that they faced the wall as well. And so in China and Korea, the Rinzai monks are still facing outside. But in Hakuin, about 300 years ago, so he changed the sitting position, and now in Japan, only Rinzai monks facing inside. And for 1 year, I was sitting in that environment, facing inside, and I don't know, there probably is a difference, but it's not so drastic as you would think. Because it's not that you're kind of looking at each other. It's not that you're looking at each other.
No, of course that is. It's not about that. I experienced as when the master sits facing the others, that more is given.
Pardon?
More is given.
More?
Is given.
More is giving.
But that's my personal experience. Just wondering about it.
That's not my experience.
No, yeah.
No.
But maybe that's also depends on the master.
Yeah, it depends on the master, and probably also depends on the student or on the person who feels so.
Yeah, also, of course.
And what you are used to do.
Pardon? Yes, please.
How do you feel that you help people?
How do I feel?
Yeah, it's because I can explain a bit. All the time of my practice, or not so good practice, I have not this idea that I have.
You don't have that idea.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Because if you have the idea that you are helping people, then there's no reason for you to help people. I don't know, like that we all know these people that can't stop telling us how much they help people and how good they are, and they do this and they do that all to help people. In reality, that they annoy the people around them, telling them how good they are and how helpful they are and how kind people they are. So if you don't have the feeling that you're helping people, good, because then you can work on that. Just as I said, with whenever I read these words by Dogen about loving words, loving speech, kind speech, I'm reminded that there's still lots of things that I can improve in my own practice. Not that I want to become one of these nice, always smiling Buddhists that are always kind, but still, it's something that's worth considering from time to time. Am I really measured at the yardstick that I find in Dogen Zenji? Am I a bodhisattva? And the answer is probably no. So then I should work on that. How about Bodhimind? I talked a lot about a Bodhimind. Is my mind a manifestation of Bodhimind? Sometimes maybe. Most of the times maybe not. So can work on that. And if you feel the same, that Bodhimind, maybe that's different from what I have here right now. Good. There's this famous haiku that Sawaki Roshi quotes from time to time, is that the shadow of the pine tree is as dark as the moon shines bright. if there's no pine tree, if you don't see a shadow there, you don't see your own dark sides, it means there's no moon shining. Or if you think that there is no shadow in the first place, like I'm all shiny, then you must be deluding yourself. So if you have the feeling I could be a little more helpful for people, that's already great Satori. That's the moon of Satori that says so. Yes.
How strongly do you recommend the full lotus posture for sitting zazen?
Like this session I said only in half. I could have tried full, but I didn't. Why? I don't know why. Because I wanted to have the feeling I'm having a holiday here. I could have tried full. When I sit in Antaji 45 minutes, I can't sit in full lotus. I can only sit in half. And 40 minutes like this, maybe. 1.5 days I could have tried and maybe it would have worked. While during the normal regular Antaji days where we have 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, I sit in full lotus because it gives me more stability. In half lotus I wouldn't have the stability. It wouldn't, not only physically, also it wouldn't feel the same. So if I could sit in full lotus for a whole session, I'd probably do it. This time I didn't try, okay. But I could have tried and it probably would have felt different. But then, even though I say die on the cushion, there's also physical limits. So in my case, an Antaji 5-day session in full lotus isn't practical. 1 day I can do, 5 days no. So I try, or also I advise people that to sit, if they can sit in half lotus, please sit in half lotus, but if you can also sit in full lotus, well, you just have to try and you see the difference. You feel the difference. Much more stability.
Yeah, try to sit as stable as you can. And I mean, Cs are also not bad, but they're left to right, you don't have much stability. The Caesar, if you have the Caesar, it's also like here the hips, very good for the hips, I think, but left and right you don't have much stability. So full lotus, if you can, of course, I would do that. But as long as we have a body and as long as we breathe, we can practice zazen, right?
Yes. Yes, on a chair. I mean, there's these different philosophies regarding sitting on a chair, but I mean, if people can't sit on the Caesar bench either, for me, sitting on a chair is also okay. If they then start around to move on the chair, I get a little bit impatient. Like, that I have the feeling, well, you have to, so you never will be without pain, even on the chair. Of course, your buttocks start to hurt after a while, your back starts to hurt, so... Dogen says that, I think, in the Gakudo Yoshinshu. If you try to be comfortable during zazen, you can even lay down. You will still be not comfortable. Even lying in your bed, you will be uncomfortable. Yes?
Before I came here, I just read one sentence of you, and you said, zazen bringt uns wirklich, of überhaupt nichts.
Yeah, that's from Sawaki.
Do you really think that it brings us nothing? That it is of no use to sit there?
Well, if there was really nothing, it would be the same as kind of 1.5 days sitting there and 1.5 days sitting in front of the computer watching videos on YouTube. That would be the same. Then probably I would be sitting in front of the computer watching videos on YouTube. But it's not the same. It's not the same, but the guy who said that first is Sawaki Roshi, Kodo Sawaki. And he didn't want to advertise the Zen for people saying, well, this is good for your health, it helps you to concentrate. Maybe you get a kensho or two, get enlightened eventually. Because then people come there with the same kind of attitude with which they run after money, they run after women, after men, after cars, whatever. You want something, you try to get it, and then you get it and you realize, oh, it's really not what I wanted, so we run after something else. And then people end up in, I don't know, the spiritual world. They try meditation techniques because now they think, now I get it, I get this happiness, I get this relaxation, I get all I wanted in my life and I couldn't get it. Sex wasn't the thing, money wasn't the thing, my job wasn't the right thing. Maybe Zazen is the thing. So Sawaki right from the start wanted to make clear that forget about it, let it go, let it go. Forget about enlightenment just as today, forget about nirvana. You will never become a Buddha. You can practice for kalpas and kalpas and kalpas, you will never make a Buddha out of you. And only if you have that attitude, then you can become a Buddha. But if you right from the start, you say, here I have this enlightenment thing and you don't know what it is, I know what it is, I won't tell you, but if you practice with me for a number of times, maybe you get closer. Maybe you attract a lot of people, but they don't have the attitude. So what, for example, that's why I did Antaji. At Antaji I want people that are willing to give their life, even their life, everything, and expect nothing. Exactly for the reason I talked about today, because that's Bodhimind. People says, I'm going to die on the cushion, and even if I get nothing in return, that's Bodhimind. That's exactly the attitude you need. So yeah, you should also take a look at the people who say these things. Like Sawaki Roshi, he said until he died when he was 86 or so. And all these enlightened people, they say, here I got the Kensho, I got the enlightenment, but then look at their lives, they never do Zazen. Or maybe they say, well, I did Zazen until I had Kensho, but now I stopped because I already have it. So although Sawaki said it's useless, I wasted my whole life. Obviously he had no regrets. He continued even after he said that.
Did you already plan a next trip to Europe?
No. No.
Could you do so now?
I mean, how about you? Like everywhere people tell me this. Like, please come again next year and things like that. But actually, from Japan to here and from here to Japan, it's the same distance. It's the same distance. It's the same money, the same time that you have to invest. So I find it a little bit funny that people always expect me to do all the time, to put all in the time, and then they say, we want to sit with you, please come here. Yeah, if you want to sit with me, you're welcome, you're welcome. I don't say don't come to Antaji. I welcome you at Antaji. I don't know, what is a cheap ticket to Japan? Probably for 800 euro you can get a reasonable ticket. Maybe even for 600 or 700 during the cheap travel times. And you can stay for 3 months. That's cheaper in the average meditation center in, I don't know, in Europe.
How is life in Japan after everything that happened? Is there what you notice actually?
In the western part of Japan, you don't notice much of a difference. And in Tokyo, honestly, I don't know if, for example, if my wife and children were in Tokyo, if I would feel that it's safe for them.
Okay.
I'm not sure. And I think many Japanese, they're not quite sure. But as in this quote by Shotoku Taiji, they go with the majority, and nobody says, I leave. I leave. Actually, yeah, most Japanese won't do that. So
stay with danger.
Yeah, and it's not clear. I mean, probably even the experts don't know exactly how dangerous it is.
Yeah,
how
long it will continue staying there.
In 30 years we will know how the cancer rates have grown. But right now nobody can say if it's maybe a 5% increase in cancer in the future, or 1% decrease, or maybe a 50% increase. Nobody knows that. And people try to play it down. And people, try to believe that and hope it's true.
Do you think if you live, Mushotoku, a lot
of work and no results, do you think it can make you happy to live? Or
yes.
Yes.
Well, if you have Bodhimind, if you find pleasure in doing something for others, even without them saying thank you to you, then of course it makes you happy, because that's what you want to do. If you want to have, for example, a child, then you're happy when that child is born, although there's lots of trouble involved with that. You're happy to care for that child, you're happy to see the child happy, although during the first years of the life, the child will never say thank you or anything. The child only causes trouble. But if you enjoy that, then of course you're happy. If you don't enjoy that, of course you're not happy. And with the child, it's easy. With other people, it's not so easy. Like cooking, for example. But if you enjoy to cook for people and you see that they eat and after that they're happy, they're content, and even though they don't say thank you to you or anything, you're completely ignored as the cook, even that can make you happy.
What can I do if I'm not happy when people don't say thank you to me?
Get over it.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, I think there's nothing you can do but go on. Go on for the time being. Practice Zazen, die on the cushion. Die in the kitchen, die at your job, die in the family.
Look at your motives.
Look at your motives. I mean, what do you want to do? What kind of life do you want to live? If you don't want to live as a bodhisattva, then you should stop in the first place, because there's no reward for you if you don't want to do this. If you want to do it, well, then take it as a reminder, as she said, or as I said, remind yourself, well, it's a lack of Bodhimind on my side. You cannot force people to say thank you to you. Sometimes people say thank you to you, and that's so wonderful. Sometimes they don't. You can't force them. And if you're bothered by that, it means that your body-mind is not so developed yet. Because otherwise you would be thankful that you're alive right now. Only for that. There's no reason why you should be alive now. You could have died yesterday. And most of us, we wouldn't even know about it. Maybe Hubert and Laurence would know about it. Well, not yesterday. Let's say 3 days ago, you died. We don't even know about it. Laurence and Hubert know about it, but they don't care. They've already forgotten you. But it's not the case. You should be happy about it. You're here right now. And if you have body-mind, you're thankful. You're thankful that you're right now here. And for example, if you're standing in the kitchen, thank you that I can cook for these people. I'm the one who should be thankful. Thankful that I can help these people, that I can do something for them. I'm the one who should be thankful. Of course, like I say it as if it was easy, but it's not easy for me. In Antaiji, when there's many kinds of people, and sometimes I have the feeling, why am I doing this job? Why do I continue wiping people's asses all the time? On the homepage, I say, I do not wipe your ass. Still, the people come and I have to wipe their ass. Why do I do that? And I have to remind myself, well, why did I take this job? What am I doing here? I should be thankful that they give me this opportunity. It's a great opportunity for me. And, well, just as the teacher kind of influences, or kind of there's the mutual influence between Sangha and the teacher. So sometimes the Sangha complains about the teacher they get, or the teacher complains about the Sangha he gets. But basically it's a mirror thing. So when I complain about the people I get in Antaiji, it's basically, well, I'm complaining about myself. It's like a cook who's complaining about this food, who's making this dish here. Well, it's the dish I made. So if people don't say thank you, that's also maybe one thing to consider. Maybe they would have thanked you if you had a different attitude, but maybe it's something in your attitude also. Who knows? Pardon?
It is the society we're living in.
Oh,
I think.
okay, that is okay. There's a problem with the society, but you cannot change the society if you don't start here.
It's expecting the expectation. You can let go of expectations. Maybe you should move to another country because Dutch people are very
French society is a problem.
Yes. One question: how to keep motivation? Because sometimes they ask me in the dojo to do zazen, and once I did it, and I was alone. And normally we sit 2 times 40 minutes, and this day I sit 2 times 35 minutes.
Good.
So, but now it's already 3 years or something that I pass the time with. I don't like to go to session. Sometimes I go, but I'm not motivated. And it's like this. So why? When I see Zen masters, they are all the time so good motivated, and I don't understand.
Yeah, because they get paid for it. Well, anyway, like there's 2 sides. One is the thing I said. When you do the Zen, you don't do it for yourself alone. You do it for the whole Sangha, and the whole Sangha doesn't do it for you. The other thing is, if you don't do the Zen, nobody's going to do it for you. If you're not there, the Sangha cannot replace you. And what Joseph said, why do you do the Zen? Do you do it for the Sangha only? No, you do it because you want to do it. And, well, when you say you have difficulties to motivate yourself, it means, well, you forget that from time to time. So you have to remind you, well, why did I come here in the first place? Why do I do this? And if nobody's there around, I experienced that a number of times when I was living in Osaka in a park, and I had this Zen group, but it was basically me most of the days. And sometimes it was kind of drizzling, rainy. You have to ask yourself, well, why am I doing this? And probably it's hard to say in words, but there's something that brought you there on the cushion. And that should keep you there. And when you feel, well, there's actually nothing there anymore, I wasted all these years, then okay, then you do something else. But in my case, it never sounded like I had any, or for me it never felt as if I had any alternative. For me it was...
I see our dojo leader, I think she also does not have this moment of doubt. I don't know, maybe I don't. So it's...
No, but I mean, also it's okay to have these doubts. I mean, enjoy the doubts. No? Go through those doubts as well, because they help you to become more clear. If you're always in a kind of this kind of trance, you enjoy it, everybody enjoys it, there's a lot of energy in the dojo, so you go there because there's the energy. But then once you get out, in Japanese they have this saying, there's this kind of bamboo stick with a kind of the things inside removed. So that's like a pipe. You have a bamboo pipe, you have a snake in the bamboo pipe. And when the snake is in the bamboo pipe, it's always straight. Has no help but straight. But once it gets out, it won't be straight anymore. And the same is when there's a very kind of vigorous energy in it, with a lot of energy, a Sangha you have, or charismatic teacher, and you're there and you feel the same energy in yourself. That's easy, but then what do you do when you're on your own? So it's good if you have this early in your practice, that you're asking yourself, well, what am I doing here? Is it really the right thing for me? And so you're like the snake that's not in the bamboo pipe, but you're outside and you have to learn how to get straight by yourself.
Okay, I'm still there.
Good
Yeah.
for you.
Good for you, yeah. Did all of you get the prints? I think I got only 17 of this one. You don't have?
I don't have. Thank
You don't have. Which are you missing?
I'm not sure. I have the same one in all languages.
Yeah.
But you don't have the Gakudo Yojinchu stuff.
I've got only the one in the rain.
Here's the Gakudo English and Dutch version. So the complete chapters you can also find on the internet, Dutch version of the Antaisi homepage, and also Sangha Maastricht has also the text. Also the poem by Miyazawa. Any other questions? Anything else? No. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon again in Antaisi.
Can everyone come there?
Yes. Like you find the information on the homepage. So there are certain times during the year when we close, but 2/3 of the year or so we're open. And well, what we do, you know now. Plus some farm work. Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice drive home. See you again.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.